Good evening and welcome back, Poetry Love Buzz. It is I, ZM Wise, and here I am with Miss Rebecca Trumble, and she will be speaking with us about her involvement in the arts, her writing, and much, much more. So, why don't you start off by telling us what sort of led you into writing? When did you realize you had the gift?
Wow. Well, I used to hate writing. I remember my fourth grade teacher had us try to write, and she had a questionnaire sort of beforehand asking us if we liked to write, and if so, what we liked to write. And I remember just answering, I hate writing, don't make me do this. But then I discovered that I sort of liked to write a year later, funnily enough. And I started to write this short story, which was total garbage, not looking back on it. But it really is what pitched me into writing. But poetry specifically, I knew I liked to write it in 8th grade, which is sort of like the beginning of like this long, dark time. So like in 8th grade, I was like writing all these angsty, 8th grade poems. But then I took a hiatus because I was like super depressed. And then once I started to go to therapy and like get that depression lifted, my therapist and I were talking about different things, and then she's like, "Maybe you should write." So I began to like write all these poems, and some of them are like, some of them are, it's sort of here and there, but it's everything that I write. It's a part of myself, in that I get my inspiration from what's ever happened to me, whatever I'm feeling at that moment. If I am feeling the strong emotion, it could be either happy or sad, in between. I feel like I have to spill it, you know, onto the paper, and like every single poem is me, like a part of myself.
That's absolutely beautiful. Um, what is your writing process like? Like, how can you let us into that whole process?
It's it's weird. It's like if I could be like doing anything. I could be reading. I could be doing math, and maybe I'll be listening to music, or like just a snippet of a phrase will come into my mind, and if I like it, I'll like write it down, and if I don't like it, I'll just let it go. Like, okay, no, you're sort of gross. Like, don't just recycle yourself, please. And then either the inspiration comes right away after that, like, oh, I heard this phrase, I have to write it down, and like then I'm already forming like what I want around it, or how I want it to be shaped. If not, then I just sort of leave it there, let it marinate, and then revisit it if I do want to revisit it. There's a lot of unfinished stuff because of that, but that's my sort of day-to-day process. If I feel something extremely strong, I'll just like take my pen and just start writing, and whatever comes out of that, I'll read, and if I think it's worth editing, I'll edit and revise it and stuff.
Definitely. How often do you edit your pieces, and how often do you leave the like? How often can you look at a finished draft and say, "Yes, that's it"?
Ooh, that's only happened like a few times. Like some of them, it's like they could be tampered with, but I don't want to touch them because I sort of like how they are right now. But I know that if I had like inspiration, I could like switch it up. Yeah, only a few times. Only like once I see it, I'm like, this rings true. Like I read it, and my heart is like, yep, that is exactly what you wanted to write. This is how it is, sort of thing.
So, expanding on something you mentioned earlier, Rebecca, about how you were saying you wrote this short story. What happened with the transition from short story to poetry? How did you find each other?
Wow. I mean, I still do like to write short stories. I'm working on several right now amidst poetry, but poetry was always something that's easily accessible. The creative stamina for poetry, in my opinion, like since I can draw it from personal experience, since I draw it from everything that I'm feeling, it comes a lot easier to me than, creative writing. Creative writing short stories is like, I have an idea, but how do I get from point A to point B? And with poetry, it's like, it's just there. So whenever the like there was a connect between them was around seventh grade with my English teacher, and we went through a poetry. We had to do it like a sort of anthology type thing where we found a collection of poetries and then added like a few of our own. And that's when I realized that I really like poetry as well. That's when I started to get interested.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Also, something else that you mentioned earlier was you mentioned you had depression before. Even though you had it, did you feel that somehow, while you had it, it somehow fueled some of your work, or?
Definitely. I mean, I'm still like dealing with it on a daily basis. Like I'm still in therapy. I'm still on medication. You know, it's still something that's always probably always going to be there the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely fuels a lot of things. It influences my day-to-day life, whether I like it or not. You know, if one of those days where I just am feeling like down or anything, it does like affect my mindset. It affects how I see the world, and with that, it affects how I write. So if like I'm not seeing the world in a particularly in a way that I would usually see it if I was like in a better mood, it would transfer into my writing, and my writing would either be more like dark or a different flavor than what I usually write.
Understandable. Uh, Now, tell me about this specific poem you wrote after the Women's March. How did that affect you?
Oh, yeah. Oh gosh, that was so great. I went to a women's march in Austin. Fantastic. I felt good. I felt determined. For the political thing, and I felt like hopeful that stuff will change. And the poem arose like that hopeful sort of like place of healing that hope can bring, and that place of healing and hope that everyone sort of needs right now.
Of course. That's wonderful. What was the highlight of the march for you?
I think the speakers. I mean, the march in itself was an amazing unifying thing. Chanting with people, walking next to people, interacting with people, just because you know that they share what you share, they feel what you're feeling. Seeing everyone's signs. But the speakers, they had speakers of people from DACA, of people, um, running for like either Congress or a political position, or people influenced by the presidency in any way. And just hearing their stories and hearing their experiences not only like validated what I was going through and probably a lot of other people were going through, it fueled us that we were not alone. And then they had this really cool law dude come up, and he was a lawyer, and he was like explaining the legal side of that, which was really cool.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, it was just an all in all like awesome experience of knowledge.
Oh, that's amazing. That's absolutely. I'm so glad you got to experience that
Yeah.
for sure. What are you currently reading at the moment?
Me, wow. Okay, let's see. I'm reading like school books, and I'm reading like separate books. I'm reading the 10th of December for school, and I'm about to be reading Musing Ourselves to Death on the side. I am reading several poetry books. I don't know if you know who Christopher Poindexter is.
I do, actually.
Shout out to Christopher Poindexter.
Yes, indeed.
Amazing author, poet. One of my favorite books of his is Lavender.
Mm.
Lavender. I have his newest book, not with me, in my backpack, but I carry it with me. And I'm also going to start a book called Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay. So it's just a whole variety of things. I just finished like a fiction series that I've read a few times.
What is that?
Oh, it's by Sarah J. Maas. It's the first book is called Throne of Glass, but I just read the last few books because she's coming out with another book this year, so I gotta catch myself up.
Definitely. Do you have any tips for any recommended tips or little nuggets of wisdom for like to impart on new coming writers and or just people in the arts? Anything you can recommend to them?
Oh goodness. I mean, I don't know if I'm qualified to say this, but my sister is also artistic, and she is an art right now, and her current art teacher is like telling them what's right and what's wrong. Like, this is what you need to do to paint. This is what it is. But I guess my sort of insight on that is that there's no right or wrong for poetry. Sure, there's like, structures and stanzas and all that, but if you want to write, there's no rules behind it. Nothing is illegal in the writing world. Nothing is wrong. If it looks good to you on paper, that's how it should be. And same thing with art, same thing with music. If it sounds good to you, if it feels good for you and right, just because it doesn't feel right to someone else doesn't mean that it is not correct. Whatever you put down on paper and you're satisfied with is yours.
That's wonderful. You should quote yourself for sure. All right, so all right. Well, now that we're nearing the end of this wonderful interview, would you mind sharing with us rather a couple of samples that really speak to you and that you think that everybody needs to hear?
Sure.
Not that there's any pressure.
I'll share two, if that's okay.
Go right ahead.
As you can tell, I don't know if you can tell, my favorite color is yellow. It's an influencing color since my depression, and the poem that I'm about to read, called Yellow, it was like what got me into writing, even though I was like depressed. So yeah. Yellow. Let me float in a cadmium dream, so I can finally feel the wholesome color, to sink my hands into the depths of its warmth. I can see yellow, my eyes eat it up, hungrily devouring the constant infinity. I taste yellow. It's sharp and bright like lemon, rich the way autumn skies are, and so smooth you could taste the cream on your tongue. So sweet, with hints of lazy days, and of a time when things are typed on typewriters and bikes were ridden everywhere. Yellow smells like the feeling of eyes squeezed shut and heads thrown back against the wind. Yellow smells the way I feel, and I'm brimming with delight, of the feather-light scent of sun carried on the backs of the winds. It smells like heat so strong it cleanses the soul, and light so pure it blinds out all of the colors away. My mind is made of yellow. Mikado stains my hands, and is behind my eyelids, around my ears, through my lungs. It fills my veins. Every inch of me is coated with that cadmium dream. It's been a while since I could be yellow, but now I feel the beginnings of a sunrise.
Ooh, beautiful.
And then I'll read the one I wrote for the Women's March.
Yes, I was hoping you would. A personal favorite of mine, I gotta
really?
say. Yes,
oh,
actually.
That's great, thank you.
Of course.
It's called Gentle Things. Create gentle things that last. Let them be soft and kind. The world may be harsh and cruel, but they need not harden too much. These gentle things will be our salvation. With a lover's kiss, they will bestow peace on our brow. The gentle things will walk the earth, flowers springing at their heels, vines twining between their fingers, and restore what once was. In the throng of hatred, they speak love, despite the chill of the cold reality of our own making. A golden warmth follows their wake. These gentle things will press their hands onto the cracked heart of nature and help her heal. The scars of war-torn, polluted wastelands on the cheeks of her face will fade into meadows of wildflowers. Roots will curl into her head, replacing the mass of charred and mangled trees left by careless wildfires. The color of her chapped lips will return, and the ocean of her eyes will clear from murky brown to crystalline blue. And she will be okay. Her womb will glow anew, and life will once again pour from her. The gentle things will curl out the base of her limbs, having made gentle things of their own, and let themselves sink into the brush until they're brought back from whence they came. The cycle will continue until all that is left are the gentler things, giving back to the dirt from which they were born. Then, once all is right in the world, they will slumber until she calls on them again, because they will be needed again, to clean and patch what mistakes wrought by humans who should know better but don't. Though no matter the damage, she will always survive. Earth has always had a funny way of healing herself.
Never get tired of hearing that.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So you had a featured reading recently. What was that experience like for you?
It was exhilarating. It really was. I'm so conflicted about sharing my poetry because I want to share it. And I do, and I love sharing it with the group, but also it's sort of like, for me, it's like when I'm most vulnerable. It is my true self. It's my raw self. It's me
Mhm.
giving a piece of myself, letting you peer into my heart and my soul, which is terrifying. Um, but it's also exhilarating in a way that makes me feel like I'm seen, or that people also feel what I'm feeling, and that I'm less alone and more connected with everyone else.
Definitely. Well said. Well said. No, it's quite true. I mean, poetry reading, it's one of the ultimate forms of feeling judged, feeling naked, feeling vulnerable. You don't know what to expect, especially when you're pretty much, especially if they're rough drafts, if they haven't, even if they haven't been published anywhere. That's even straight from the pages of the book. That's even, it can be even more terrifying. And I know exactly what you mean. And you don't know, you just don't know what to expect. But it's as you know, the usually the group would act like somewhat of a family.
No, we're all so close. It's wonderful. I feel, totally safe sharing my stuff there. I know no one is gonna be judged, no matter what.
Yes, definitely, and we need to spread that message of awareness to
Yes.
every area that does poetry readings. Do not judge who's up there. That's a piece.
Yeah.
That's a piece of their soul.
That is who they are.
It's exactly. It's a little bit of their written DNA per se. Before we conclude, would you like to plug any of your work? Where can we find you?
Well, I am working on getting some things published. I know a successful poet slash author, and she is currently helping, organize my work. Okay.
I'm so sorry. Start over from the successful author part.
Yeah, successful author, and she is, helping me organize my work. She hasn't. I've emailed her my work. She's currently looking through them, and maybe she'll direct me to a different editor, or she'll connect me to someone who works at a publishing agency. I don't know. Very excited though. Yeah, so there will be more on that hopefully soon.
Definitely. No, I'm definitely looking forward to hearing more about that. Please keep me up to date. I want a personalized copy.
Definitely.
Well,
I'll give it to you for free.
Oh, shucks. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today, Rebecca.
Of course.
And any last words for the viewers?
Right. Just right.
Right on.
It'll be all right.
Ja, ja, ja. Thank you very much.